The asteroid belt known as Sector 7 to 9 was a desolate expanse of jagged rocks and swirling dust, far from the bustling colonies of humanity. It was here that Captain Elias Drake found himself stationed, a lonely outpost on the edge of nowhere. The war with the Valith had been simmering for decades, though no one could say who started it or why. All Elias knew was that his job was to patrol this barren wasteland, scanning for any sign of enemy activity. Most days, nothing happened, but today would change everything. Elias sat in the cockpit of his fighter jet, staring out at the endless sea of gray and black. His helmet rested beside him, its visor cracked from years of use. He sighed, rubbing his temples. This wasn't what he'd signed up for when he joined the military. Back then, he'd imagined glory, charging into battle, saving lives, making a difference. Instead, he spent his days floating through emptiness, waiting for something that never came. His console beeped suddenly, snapping him out of his thoughts. A red blip appeared on the radar screen, moving erratically among the asteroids. At first, he thought it might be debris, but the signal was too consistent. "What do we have here?" he muttered under his breath. Leaning forward, he adjusted the sensors, trying to get a clearer picture. Whatever it wasn't human. Curiosity got the better of him. Against protocol and common sense, he activated the thrusters and guided his ship toward the source of the signal. As he approached, the object came into view, a sleek, crystalline vessel unlike anything he'd seen before. Its surface shimmered faintly, reflecting the distant light of a dying star. It was unmistakably Valith. Elias's heart pounded as he circled the craft. Was this some kind of trap, or just another scout sent to spy on human territory? Either way, he should report it immediately and let command handle it. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way the ship looked. Damage. One wing was bent at an awkward angle, and smoke, or what looked like smoke, trailed behind it. Whatever had happened, it didn't seem like the Valith were leaving anytime soon. Against every instinct screaming at him to turn back, Elias docked his ship nearby and suited up. Clutching his plasma rifle tightly, he stepped onto the rocky surface of the largest asteroid and made his way toward the alien vessel. Each step felt heavier than the last, his boots crunching against the cold, lifeless ground. When he reached the ship, he hesitated. What if they were still alive inside? What if they attacked? Taking a deep breath, Elias pried open the hatch with a crowbar from his survival kit. The interior was dimly lit by soft, pulsating lights that seemed to breathe in rhythm with his own heartbeat. Strange symbols glowed faintly on the walls, casting eerie shadows across the cramped space. And then he saw her. She lay slumped against the control panel, her crystalline form fractured in places, leaking iridescent fluid. Her body shimmered faintly, even in her weakened state. And her eyes, large, multifaceted orbs, flickered weakly as she turned them toward him. For a moment, neither moved. Then, without thinking, Elias knelt beside her and pulled out his medkit. "Don't die," he whispered, though he doubted she understood him. Using tools meant for humans, he patched her wounds as best he could. She didn't resist, but her gaze never left his face. Just as he finished, she reached out with one delicate hand and touched his arm. A jolt of energy surged through him, and for a split second, he felt connected. Images flashed in his mind. Stars, planets, voices singing in harmony. Then it was gone, leaving him dizzy and confused. He stared at her, heart racing. What had just happened? Before he could process it, her body went limp and the lights around them dimmed. Elias swallowed hard, realizing the gravity of what he'd done. Saving her might have saved his soul, but it could cost him everything else. Elias carried the unconscious Valith woman back to his outpost, moving quickly and cautiously. The last thing he needed was for someone on base to spot him dragging an alien into the compound. He avoided the main corridors, sticking to abandoned maintenance tunnels and storage bays that hadn't been used in years. By the time he reached a secluded corner of the facility, Sweat dripped down his face, and his muscles burned from the effort. Gently, he laid her down on a makeshift cot fashioned from spare parts and emergency blankets. For hours, she remained still, her crystalline body glowing faintly despite her injuries. Elias sat nearby, watching her intently. Every now and then, he checked her vital signs, or at least what he assumed were vital signs. Her breathing, if it could even be called that, was slow and rhythmic, like waves lapping against a shore. Occasionally, her skin pulsed with soft, shifting colors, as if reacting to some unseen force. It was mesmerizing, but also unnerving. He couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't entirely unconscious, that somehow she knew he was there. By the third day, she stirred. At first, it was just a flicker of movement, a twitch of her hand or a subtle shift in her posture. Then her eyes opened, large and multifaceted, shimmering with hues of blue and green. Elias froze, unsure whether to reach for his weapon or stay calm. She didn't attack, though. Instead, she looked at him curiously, tilting her head slightly as if studying him. "Who are you?" Elias asked hesitantly, knowing full well she probably wouldn't understand. To his surprise, a low hum emanated from her chest, resonating through the room. It wasn't speech, not exactly, but it carried meaning all the same. His mind interpreted it instinctively, as if her thoughts were brushing against his own. "Elira," the sound seemed to say. "I am Elira." "Elira," Elias repeated slowly, testing the name on his tongue. "Okay, Elira. I'm Elias." He pointed to himself, hoping the gesture would help bridge the gap between them. She blinked once, slowly, and made another humming noise. This one felt warmer, almost approving. Over the next few days, they began to communicate in fits and starts. Elira's language was beyond anything Elias had ever encountered. It wasn't spoken so much as felt. Through trial and error, they pieced together fragments of understanding using gestures, crude drawings on scraps of metal, and the rudimentary translation device Elias scavenged from the outpost's supply closet. It was frustrating work, but each breakthrough brought them closer. Elira explained that she was a scientist and diplomat, sent to gather data about human settlements in hopes of finding common ground. Her ship had malfunctioned during her mission, leaving her stranded. But when Elias pressed her about why she'd come alone, she hesitated. For a moment, her glow dimmed, and her hum grew somber. Finally, she conveyed something vague yet profound. Her journey wasn't just scientific, it was personal. Her people believed humans were capable of more than destruction. They saw potential for peace, even if humanity itself did not. As their bond deepened, Elias found himself questioning everything he thought he knew. Growing up, he'd been taught that the Vailith were ruthless invaders bent on domination. Yet here was Elira, fragile and vulnerable, risking her life to seek understanding. What if the stories were wrong? What if both sides had been manipulated into hating each other? One evening, as they shared a quiet moment in the dim light of the storage bay, Elias voiced his doubts aloud. "Why does it have to be like this?" he muttered, staring at the floor. "Why can't we just talk?" Elira hummed softly, placing a delicate hand on his shoulder. The touch sent a wave of warmth through him, filling him with a strange sense of hope. Maybe talking was possible after all. But first, they'd have to survive long enough to make it happen. Days turned into a week, and Elias found himself torn between his growing bond with Elira and the reality of their precarious situation. The more time he spent with her, the harder it became to see her as an enemy or even as just another alien. She was intelligent, compassionate, and driven by a desire for peace that mirrored his own buried hopes. Yet every moment they stayed hidden in the storage bay brought them closer to discovery. His commanding officers were already suspicious of his recent behavior. Patrols had doubled around the outpost, and encrypted messages hinted at heightened security measures. One night, as they sat together in the dim glow of emergency lights, Elira broke the silence with a low hum. Her voice resonated softly in Elias's mind, carrying fragments of thoughts and emotions. Elias, she began hesitantly, there is something I must tell you. He leaned forward, his brow furrowing. What is it? Her crystalline form shimmered faintly, casting shifting patterns on the walls. For a long moment, she didn't respond, as if gathering her strength, or perhaps choosing her words carefully. Finally, she spoke again, her tone tinged with urgency. My presence here, it is no accident. My people knew there was a human who might help me. Elias blinked, stunned. You mean, this wasn't random? You knew I'd find you. She nodded slowly, her multifaceted eyes locking onto his. Not precisely, she admitted, but my leaders believed someone like you existed. Someone willing to listen, to act despite fear. They sent me because they hoped humanity could change. The weight of her words settled over him like a heavy blanket. He felt both honored and terrified. If her leaders trusted him enough to risk sending her into hostile territory, then what she carried must be important, critical, even. But why him? Why now? Alira reached out, her delicate hand hovering over his. I carry knowledge, she said, her hum vibrating through the room. Knowledge of a great danger, a threat that will destroy both our peoples if left unchecked. Elias's heart raced. What kind of threat? Her glow dimmed slightly, and sadness seeped into her voice. A cosmic event, a collapse in the fabric of space itself. It grows stronger each day, fed by the actions of both humans and Valeth. We have ignored its warnings for too long. Elias swallowed hard, trying to process what she was saying. If it's so dangerous, why haven't your people told us before? Why keep it a secret? Because trust has been broken, she replied simply. And because revealing it would mean exposing me, and risking everything we've worked for. Elias rubbed his temples, feeling the enormity of the situation pressing down on him. If he helped her return to her people, it could mean betrayal, not just from his superiors, but from everyone who believed the Valeth were irredeemable enemies. On the other hand, doing nothing meant ignoring a potential catastrophe that could wipe out billions. I'll help you, he said finally, his voice firm despite the storm of doubt swirling inside him. But only if you promise me one thing. Alira tilted her head, waiting. When this is over, your people need to stop hiding. No more spying, no more secrets. If we're going to survive this, we need to work together. For real. Her glow brightened, and a wave of gratitude washed over him. It is agreed, she hummed. Together, we will forge a new path. For the first time in years, Elias felt a spark of hope. But deep down, he knew the hardest part was yet to come. Elias knew their escape wouldn't be easy. The outpost was crawling with soldiers, and every second they stayed put increased the risk of discovery. But staying wasn't an option anymore, not after Alira's revelation about the cosmic threat. They needed to reach Valeth space, where her people could analyze the data she'd gathered and begin planning a solution. For that to happen, Elias had to get them both out alive. Their first step was creating a diversion. Using his access codes, Elias hacked into the outpost mainframe and triggered a false alarm, a systems failure in one of the outer docking bays. Red lights flashed across the facility, and klaxons blared as technicians scrambled to investigate. Chaos erupted, giving Elias and Alira the opening they needed. Wrapped in a tattered cloak to conceal her crystalline form, Alira followed close behind him as they slipped through shadowy corridors toward the hangar bay. Reaching his fighter jet felt like crossing a battlefield. Every corner they turned brought the possibility of running into another soldier. Twice, they narrowly avoided detection, ducking into alcoves just as patrols passed by. Alira moved silently, her shimmering body dimmed to blend with the darkness. Still, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Sooner or later, someone would notice his absence, or worse, find the empty storage bay where they'd been hiding. When they finally reached the hangar, Elias exhaled in relief. His ship stood ready, its sleek frame gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. He helped Alira climb aboard, securing her in the cramped passenger compartment before strapping himself into the cockpit. As he powered up the engines, he glanced back at her. "Hold on tight," he said grimly. "This is going to get rough." Moments later, the ship roared to life, shooting out of the hangar and into the vast expanse of the asteroid field. Alarms sounded behind them almost immediately. The diversion hadn't lasted long enough. Within minutes, 2 human fighter jets emerged from the outpost, weapons armed and locked onto their position. "Stay low," Elias shouted, though Elira likely understood only the urgency in his tone. He weaved between massive asteroids, using the jagged rocks as cover while enemy fire streaked past them. The chase was relentless, forcing him to push the ship to its limits. Sweat dripped down his face as he fought to maintain control, dodging blasts and debris alike. But the humans weren't their only problem. Scanners picked up movement ahead. Valith ships patrolling the border. Caught between 2 hostile forces, Elias made a desperate decision. "We're going dark," he muttered, flipping switches to disable their energy signature. The ship went silent, drifting invisibly among the asteroids. For several tense minutes, they floated in silence, listening to the hum of distant engines searching for them. Finally, the enemy ships gave up and retreated, leaving them alone in the void. Elias let out a shaky breath, glancing at Elira. Her glow had dimmed further, her strength clearly waning. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded weakly, her hum faint but steady. "Thank you," it resonated, "for everything." Elias clenched the controls tightly, determination hardening his features. They weren't safe yet, but they were closer than ever. As they neared the border between human and Valith space, Elias felt a mix of relief and dread. The immediate dangers seemed to have passed, for now, but the challenges ahead loomed larger than ever. Elira's condition had worsened during their escape. Her glow was fainter, her movements slower. She leaned against the wall of the cockpit, her multifaceted eyes half closed as if struggling to stay conscious. Elias glanced at her frequently, guilt gnawing at him. He had promised to protect her, yet every jolt and maneuver of the ship must have been agony for her fragile body. "Just hold on," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "We're almost there." Elira managed a weak hum in response, but it lacked its usual warmth. Her thoughts brushed lightly against his mind, fragmented and faint. "Elias, forgive me." "For what?" he asked sharply, turning his head toward her. "You didn't do anything wrong." Her hum grew softer still, carrying an emotion he couldn't quite place. Regret, perhaps, or resignation. Then she spoke again, her voice trembling with effort. "What I carry, it is heavier than you know." Before Elias could ask what she meant, alarms blared throughout the ship. A swarm of human fighters appeared on the horizon, flanked by smaller reconnaissance drones. Apparently, command hadn't given up the search after all. Worse still, Valith ships materialized on the other side of the border, their crystalline hulls glowing ominously against the darkness of space. Caught in the crossfire, Elias realized their chances of slipping through unnoticed were slim to none. "We need to move," he shouted, gripping the controls tightly. But before he could act, Elira placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. Her touch sent a wave of calm through him, despite the chaos around them. "Listen," she urged, her hum resonating deeply in his mind. "This cannot wait any longer." With great effort, she activated a holographic display embedded in her wrist, a swirling mass of data and images that filled the cockpit. At first, Elias didn't understand what he was seeing. It looked like a star map, but one distorted by strange gravitational forces. Then he noticed the black hole at its center, a monstrous void pulling everything toward it, warping light and matter into oblivion. "This is the threat," Elira explained. "It grows stronger each day, fed by our reckless exploitation of quantum energy. Both our peoples are responsible." Elias stared at the projection, his stomach sinking. "How bad is it?" "If left unchecked, it will consume entire star systems, including Earth and my homeworld." Her voice trembled with urgency. "But there is hope. Together, Humans and Vailith can stabilize it temporarily using our combined technologies. After that, we must learn to live differently. The enormity of the situation hit Elias like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about saving Aelira or earning forgiveness. It was about survival. Billions of lives depended on bridging the gap between two species who had hated each other for centuries. Outside, the battle intensified. Plasma bolts streaked past the ship, narrowly missing them. Aelira straightened slightly, determination flashing in her dimming glow. "I will reveal this truth to both sides," she said firmly, "even if it costs me everything." "No," Elias snapped, grabbing her hand. "You've done enough. Let me handle this." But Aelira shook her head, her hum steady despite her frailty. "This is my duty. Trust me, Elias." Before he could argue further, she activated a transmitter hidden within her cloak. In an instant, the message broadcast across all frequencies, human and Vailith alike. Images of the black hole, along with Aelira's explanation, flooded every communication channel. For a moment, the fighting stopped as both sides processed the revelation. Then came the retaliation. Human ships fired warning shots, while Vailith vessels closed in menacingly. Trapped between them, Elias braced for the worst. But Aelira simply smiled, a soft, radiant expression that lit up the cockpit one last time. "I have faith in you," she whispered. And then, with a final burst of energy, she triggered a fail-safe device on her wrist, creating a temporary shield around the ship. It wouldn't last long, but it bought them precious time. Elias clenched the controls, tears stinging his eyes. Whatever happened next, he vowed to honor her sacrifice and make sure her message wasn't ignored. Months passed since Elias's sacrifice, and the Zithari world transformed in ways no one could have predicted. The rebellion dissolved as the truth about the corporate conspiracy spread not only across their planet, but also reached human space. Humanity's leaders scrambled to distance themselves from the rogue corporations involved, leading to widespread investigations and reforms. For the first time in centuries, there was a glimmer of hope for peace between humans and Zithari. Zerithia stood atop the palace balcony, gazing out at the crowd gathered below. They were no longer just Zithari. Among them stood human diplomats, scientists, and even former captives who had been part of the experiments. Together, they listened intently as Zerithia addressed them, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. "Today marks the beginning of a new era," she declared, her words echoing through the vast courtyard. "An era built on honesty, trust, and mutual respect. We will not forget the lessons of our past, the betrayals, the greed, the lives lost, but we will honor those sacrifices by forging a better future." Her gaze lingered on a small crystalline statue placed near the edge of the balcony. It depicted Elias, or Kalian, in his final moments, standing tall despite the weight of his burden. To the Zithari, it symbolized courage and redemption. To humanity, it represented a chance to rebuild what had been broken. For Zerithia, it was simply a reminder of the man who had changed everything. "Our alliance begins now," she continued, gesturing toward the human delegation. "Through shared knowledge, resources, and understanding, we can create a world where neither species fears the other, where cooperation replaces conflict." The crowd erupted into cheers, their voices blending harmoniously, a sound that would have been unimaginable mere months ago. Zerithia allowed herself a brief smile before retreating inside, needing a moment alone to process all that had happened. In her private chambers, she approached the statue once more, running her fingers gently over its smooth surface. Memories of Elias flooded her mind, their arguments, their laughter, their final moments together. She missed him more than words could express, yet she found solace in knowing his legacy lived on. "You showed us how to heal," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "You taught me that love transcends identity, species, and even time. I will carry that lesson forever." As night fell, Zerithia walked out onto the palace grounds, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, perhaps, Elias watched over them, a guardian spirit ensuring their fragile peace endured. She didn't know if he truly rested among the constellations or if he existed only in her heart. Either way, his presence remained undeniable. Back inside the palace, negotiations continued late into the night. Human and Cytheri representatives worked side by side, drafting treaties and agreements aimed at fostering unity. Mistakes would be made along the way, and challenges undoubtedly lay ahead. But for the first time, both sides approached the future with genuine hope instead of fear. Before retiring for the evening, Zerithia paused at the entrance to her chambers. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the polished crystal walls, reminding her of the strength Elias had helped her find within herself. With a deep breath, she stepped inside, ready to face whatever came next. For though Elias was gone, his spirit endured, in every handshake exchanged between humans and Cytheri, in every decision made with compassion rather than suspicion, and in every starlit sky that reminded them of the infinite possibilities ahead. And so, under the watchful gaze of the cosmos, two worlds began to heal. One step, one memory, one act of courage at a time. The shield around the ship flickered, its energy draining rapidly as it absorbed the relentless barrage of plasma fire from both human and Violet forces. Inside the cockpit, Elias clenched the controls so tightly his knuckles turned white. Elira's failsafe had bought them time, but not much. The countdown on her wrist device ticked ominously, each second bringing them closer to disaster. Elira herself sat slumped against the wall, her crystalline form dimmer than ever. Her glow pulsed weakly, like a fading ember in the dark. Yet even in her weakened state, she reached out to him one last time, her touch light but deliberate. "Elias," she hummed softly, her voice barely audible over the chaos outside. "You must carry this forward." "I can't do this without you," he replied hoarsely, his voice cracking under the weight of emotion. "You're the one they'll listen to, not me." Her multifaceted eyes met his, filled with a quiet resolve that silenced his protests. "They won't listen to me now," she admitted, "but they will listen to you, if you speak with truth and courage." Before he could respond, alarms blared again. The shield was failing faster than expected, and enemy ships were closing in. Human fighters launched another wave of attacks, their pilots unaware, or perhaps uncaring, that the fragile ship held the key to saving billions. Meanwhile, the Valeth vessels moved into position, their weapons charging for what looked like a final strike. Elias felt panic rising in his chest. There wasn't enough time to escape. He glanced at Elira, who seemed to sense his thoughts. She placed her hand firmly on his arm, her hum resonating with calm determination. "Go," she urged. "Take my message to my people, and yours. Tell them we are stronger together." "No," Elias shouted, shaking his head fiercely. "I'm not leaving you here." But Elira's gaze never wavered. With a sudden burst of strength, she activated a secondary function on her wrist device, a beacon that sent out a signal only Violet ships could detect. Instantly, the alien vessels halted their advance, hovering uncertainly. Elira turned back to Elias, her expression serene despite the toll her injuries had taken. "This is my choice," she said gently, "and my duty." Before he could stop her, she rose unsteadily to her feet and stepped toward the airlock. Her movements were slow but purposeful, every step radiating grace and sacrifice. Elias lunged after her, grabbing her arm, but she stopped him with a single look, one that conveyed gratitude, trust, and an unshakable belief in the future. "I believe in you, Elias Drake," she whispered, her hum soft but clear. Then, before he could react, she triggered the airlock, stepping out into the void beyond. The moment she did, her body emitted a brilliant flash of light, illuminating the battlefield like a miniature sun. The energy wave disrupted all nearby ships, forcing them to retreat temporarily. Back in the cockpit, Elias stared through the viewport, tears streaming down his face as the light faded. Elira was gone, but her message lingered, echoing across space and within his heart. She had given everything to ensure humanity, and the Valeth would hear the truth. Now it was up to him to honor her sacrifice. With renewed resolve, Ilias set a course for the nearest Valeth outpost, navigating through the confusion left in the wake of Illyria's final act. As the ship sped forward, he replayed her words in his mind. "We are stronger together." Those 4 simple words carried the weight of hope and the promise of a new beginning.